A decorated colonel told a black female captain her place was behind a desk, not a rifle. He publicly challenged her to a test. He never expected her to break records held only by Navy SEAL legends. The laughter that erupted in the Oak Room at Fort Jericho was a low, rumbling thing, like distant artillery. It rattled the heavy crystal tumblers on the polished mahogany bar and made the cigar smoke clinging to the air tremble. Colonel Alastair Thorne leaned back in his worn leather Chesterfield armchair, a cruel glint of amusement in his pale blue eyes. He surveyed the woman standing before him, his expression a mask of theatrical disbelief. "Are you serious, Captain?" he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. "You want to use the Tier 1 range?" Captain Dr. Evelyn Reed, 30 years old, stood at a perfect parade rest. Her Army service uniform was immaculate, the captain's bars on her shoulders gleaming softly under the dim, exclusive lighting of the officers' club. Her PhD and data scientist insignias were crisp against the fabric, a testament to a different kind of battlefield. She held her posture, her fists clenched invisibly at her sides. "Yes, sir," Eve repeated, her voice steady, betraying none of the storm brewing inside her. "I am formally requesting a slot for this afternoon." "A slot," Thorne echoed, savoring the word as if it were a fine joke. He gestured with his glass to the circle of his cronies, mostly infantry and armor officers. "Gentlemen, did you hear that? Captain Reed, our resident numbers genius, wants to play with the big boys' toys." Major Thompson, a man whose face was perpetually flushed from whiskey, chuckled. "Colonel, with all due respect, her battlefield is a server room. Let's not get her pretty uniform dirty with gun oil. Perhaps you'd like to write a statistical analysis of our bullet drop, Captain," added another, sparking a fresh wave of snickers. The air was thick with the suffocating arrogance of the bold guard, men who believed true soldiering was measured in mud and gunpowder, not algorithms and intellect. To them, Evelyn was a triple offense, a woman, a black woman, and a techie in a world they considered sacredly their own. "Sir," Evelyn pressed on, her gaze unwavering. "Today is the 3rd anniversary of my father's death in the line of duty. Master Sergeant Marcus Reed. He taught me to shoot. I wish to honor his memory on the range." Thorne's smile tightened. "Ah, yes. Sergeant Reed. A good man. A grunt. He would have understood that different soldiers have different roles." He stood, his imposing frame casting a shadow over her. "Listen here, girl," he said, the word girl a deliberate, dismissive slap. "Your request is denied. Go back to your computers and let the real soldiers handle the weapons." The humiliation burned, hot and sharp. But beneath it, a familiar, icy calm began to spread through her veins, a composure forged in a lifetime of such moments. "With all due respect, Colonel," she said, her tone dangerously serene, "base regulations state that any officer may request range time for proficiency, provided they meet safety qualifications. I am qualified." Thorne's eyes narrowed. The direct challenge, wrapped in the language of regulations, infuriated him. "Fine," he snarled, his voice suddenly sharp. "You want to shoot so badly? Let's make this interesting." He looked around the room, a predator playing to his audience. "A little test. We'll go to the 100-meter line. 10 shots. If you can hit the paper 3 times, just 3, I'll sign your authorization myself. But when you fail, you will never waste my time with this fantasy again. Deal?" Eve felt a spark ignite in her chest. "I accept your proposal, sir." What Thorne and his cronies didn't know was that they weren't just making a bet with a data scientist. They were challenging a legacy forged in secret, a promise whispered over a flag-draped coffin, and a skill honed to a level they couldn't possibly comprehend. They were about to witness their world of prejudice and tradition be shattered by the very person they sought to diminish. The walk from the Oak Room to the elite firing range was a gauntlet of whispered insults. Colonel Thorne led the procession like a feudal lord, his sycophants trailing behind, their voices deliberately loud enough for Evelyn to hear. "I'll bet you $5 she can't even chamber a round," Major Thompson muttered. "She'll probably ask which end the bullet comes out of," another officer chimed in, followed by a wave of muffled laughter. Eve walked a few paces behind them, her face an impassive mask. Each venomous comment was a stone, but instead of letting it weigh her down, she used it to build the wall around her focus, making it higher, stronger. Her mind retreated to a quieter place, a memory she kept polished like a precious gem. She's 14, the scent of pine needles and gun oil sharp in the crisp morning air. Her father, Master Sergeant Marcus Reed, stands behind her. He isn't the jovial man who helps with her homework, he is a different entity here. His voice is calm, a low rumble of command. "Breathe, Evie. Don't fight the rifle. Become part of it. The trigger doesn't move back. The world moves forward around it. Feel that stillness? That's where the shot lives." He was a legend, a ghost in the special operations community. His official records listed him as a decorated infantryman, but the truth was whispered only in the most secret circles. He was the man the snipers went to when they needed to become better than the best, the unofficial instructor for SEALs and Delta Force operators who passed through Fort Jericho. And for 15 years, he had poured every ounce of that secret knowledge into his daughter. She's 22, home on break from her ROTC program. The M24 sniper rifle feels like an extension of her own bones. "They'll underestimate you," her father tells her, cleaning a scope with meticulous care. "They'll see your brain and assume your hands are soft. They'll see your skin and assume you're weak. They'll see you're a woman and assume you don't belong. Let them. Their prejudice is their weakness, not yours. It's the blind spot you'll drive a truck through." As the group arrived at the range, the oppressive heat of the afternoon sun hit them. A figure detached himself from the shade of the control tower. Master Gunnery Sergeant Gunny Cole, a man whose face was a roadmap of a dozen deployments, watched them approach. His eyes, sharp and discerning, skipped over the smug officers and landed on Eve. He saw the way she carried herself, the economic grace of her movements. He'd seen that posture before. A ghost of a memory flickered in his eyes. He had served under Marcus Reed on one hellish tour. He knew. "Colonel," Gunny Cole said, his voice a gravelly baritone of respect, though his eyes were fixed on Evelyn. "Unexpected pleasure." "Cole," Thorne grunted dismissively. "Get a lane ready. Captain Reed here thinks she's a shooter. We're about to give her a lesson in reality." Gunny Cole's gaze met Evelyn's for a fleeting second. There was no pity in it, only a deep, questioning concern and something else, a flicker of anticipation. He had seen Marcus Reed train his operators. He knew what that training looked like. And as he watched Evelyn step forward, he realized he wasn't about to witness a humiliation. He was about to witness a reckoning. Thorne gestured grandly toward a rack of weapons. "Pick your poison, Captain. I'd recommend one of the lighter carbines. Don't want you to strain yourself." Evelyn ignored him. She walked past the standard-issue M4S and the smaller pistols often recommended to female shooters. Her eyes scanned the rack until they settled on their prize. With a reverence that was almost imperceptible, she lifted a Knight's Armament M110 SAS from its cradle. The semi-automatic sniper system was a beast, long, heavy, and brutally precise. It was the modern, upgraded incarnation of the rifle her father had loved. A few of the officers murmured in surprise. Gunny Cole's eyebrows shot up. That wasn't a casual choice. "Ambitious," Thorne sneered, his confidence unwavering. "At least you'll fail with style." Eve said nothing. She carried the rifle to the designated bench with an ease that belied its weight. Her movements were a fluid, economic ballet of practiced professionalism. She locked the bolt to the rear, checked the chamber, and slapped the bolt release. The sharp clack of the metal echoed in the sudden quiet. She seated the magazine, not with a clumsy shove, but with a firm, confident tap that sent a resonant thump through the air. Every action was precise, stripped of hesitation, a routine performed thousands of times. Gunny Cole watched, his jaw tightening. He wasn't just seeing a soldier handle a weapon. He was seeing a master artist pick up her brush. He was watching the ghost of Marcus Reed. "Looks like Daddy taught you a few parlor tricks," Thorne said, his voice laced with venom as he saw the silent admiration on some of the faces around him. "Right before he wasn't around to protect you anymore." The cruel barb struck home. For a single, searing second, white-hot rage flared in Eve's chest. But then, her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Anger is a floodlight, Evie. It blinds you. Be the laser. Cold, focused, and burn a hole right through the target." She took a slow, deliberate breath. She closed her eyes. The jeers of the officers, the oppressive heat, the weight of their judgment, it all faded away. She found the stillness her father had taught her, the silent space between heartbeats. When she opened her eyes again, the 12-year-old girl Thorne saw was gone. The data scientist was gone. All that remained was the shooter. "Ready when you are, Colonel," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, an instrument of pure function. It sent an involuntary shiver down Gunny Cole's spine. It was the tone soldiers used right before they did the impossible. Thorne, sensing the subtle shift in atmosphere, barked, "The clock is running, Captain. Let's see it." Eve settled into her shooting stance. There was no fidgeting, no last-second adjustments. Her body locked into place as if cast from a single piece of steel. Crack. The first shot was a clean, sharp thunderclap. Before its echo could die, the second followed with a rhythmic precision that was deeply unsettling. Crack. It wasn't the sound of a novice. It was the cadence of a machine. Crack. The third shot rang out. Thorne's smug grin had frozen on his face. The laughter had completely vanished, replaced by a tense, unnerving silence. The officers who had been whispering and joking now stood motionless, their eyes wide. Something was wrong. This wasn't the fumbling amateur they had come to see. This was something else entirely. The silence that had fallen over the range was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic thunder of Evelyn's rifle. Crack. 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 The fourth, fifth, and sixth shots followed in a relentless, metronomic cadence. It was a terrifyingly beautiful display of control. Each recoil was absorbed seamlessly, each new sight picture acquired in a fraction of a second. She wasn't just firing a weapon, she was conducting a symphony of controlled violence. The brass casings ejected in a perfect, glittering arc, landing in a neat little pile beside her. Major Thompson, who had been so vocal earlier, was now pale, his mouth slightly agape. He exchanged a nervous, wide-eyed glance with the officer next to him. The air of cruel sport had evaporated, replaced by a thick, heavy blanket of disbelief. "What's the holdup on the target check?" one of the younger lieutenants whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. Gunny Cole, standing behind the spotting scope, didn't answer. He didn't need to. He knew why no one was rushing to call out the hits. He could hear it. With each shot, there wasn't the dull thwack of a round hitting paper and the backstop. There was a sharp, distinctive ping, the sound a bullet makes when it strikes the dead center of the metal target holder. But it was more than that. The sound wasn't changing. It was the same ping, over and over again. Crack. Crack. The seventh and eighth shots. Eve's expression remained unchanged, a mask of pure, unadulterated focus. She was in the zone, a place of instinct and muscle memory that few people ever reach. Crack. The ninth shot. Colonel Thorne was no longer pretending. His face was a thunderous mask of confusion and fury. The foundation of his world, a world where he was the authority, where he defined the roles, where a woman like Evelyn Reed knew her place, was crumbling before his very eyes. As she prepared for the 10th and final shot, she did something that made Gunny Cole's blood run cold. She paused. For a full 2 seconds, she held her breath. Then, she made a microscopic adjustment to her aim, a shift so tiny that no one else even noticed. She was compensating for a slight shift in the wind, a phantom current only a true master would feel. It was an act of pure, sublime instinct. Crack. The final shot echoed with a profound finality. Evelyn lowered the M110, her movements economical and smooth. She engaged the safety, removed the magazine, and cleared the chamber, all with the detached air of someone finishing a routine task. She then turned to face the stunned gallery of officers. 10 shots complete as requested, Colonel, she stated, her voice returning to its normal, respectful register. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was deafening. Well, Sergeant? Thorne finally snarled at Gunny Cole, his voice a ragged attempt at authority. What's the result? How many did she manage to land? Gunny Cole slowly, reverently, pulled his eye away from the spotting scope. He was pale, and his hands, which had guided machine guns through hails of enemy fire, were visibly trembling. He looked from the scope to Evelyn, and his expression was one of pure, unadulterated awe. It was the look a man gives when he has just witnessed a miracle. Colonel, Cole began, his voice hoarse, as if the words were caught in his throat. You need to see this for yourself. Spit it out, Master Gunnery Sergeant. Thorne roared, his desperation showing. How many hits? Cole shook his head slowly, speechless. He simply stepped aside, gesturing to the scope. With a rough, angry movement, Thorne shoved him aside and pressed his own eye to the lens. He stared for 1 second. 2. 3. The color drained from his face. The arrogant posture, the lifetime of unshakable self-assurance, all of it disintegrated in an instant. He recoiled from the scope as if he'd received an electric shock. Impossible, he whispered, the word a faint puff of air. That's impossible. Major Thompson snatched the scope. His reaction was the same. Then another officer, and another. A wave of silent, horrified shock passed through the group as each man saw the irrefutable truth 100 meters away. On the target, there was no dispersion. There were no 9 misses and 1 lucky hit. There wasn't even a tight grouping of 10 shots. There was only a single, ragged hole, slightly larger than a quarter, punched directly through the bullseye. 10 shots. 1 hole. It was a level of perfection that didn't just break records. It mocked them. It was the kind of legendary feat whispered about in barracks, but never actually seen. And it had just been performed, with casual ease, by the woman they had dismissed as a girl. The silence on the range was now a living entity, thick with the weight of shattered arrogance. Colonel Thorne stood frozen, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. The hunter had become the prey, and the entire world had just turned upside tilted. Evelyn broke the silence. Her voice, though quiet, cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. Colonel Thorne, she began, her eyes locking onto his. There was no triumph in her gaze, only a cold, hard clarity. You said my place was behind a desk. You said my hands were too soft for this work. You saw my gender, my race, and my specialty, and you made a judgment. Was your judgment sound, sir? The question hung in the air, a devastating indictment. Thorne couldn't speak. He was trapped, cornered by her undeniable, impossible competence. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She hadn't come here just to win a bet. She had come to teach a lesson. She turned to the stunned Gunny Cole. Gunny, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue. Let's move the target out. 500 meters. Cole blinked, snapping out of his stupor. 500, he stammered. That was a serious distance, a challenge for most designated marksmen. Yes, Eve confirmed calmly. And after that, 800. 800 meters. Nearly half a mile. That was the territory of elite, combat-hardened snipers. To attempt it now, under this pressure, was audacious. It was a power play of the highest order. Thorne finally found his voice, a weak, strangled sound. "That's enough, Captain. You've made your point." He was trying to shut it down, to staunch the bleeding, but it was too late. The power had shifted. "No, sir," Evelyn replied, her tone still maddeningly respectful, yet backed by an unshakable authority. "You set the stage for a lesson. The lesson isn't over." By now, word had spread like wildfire. Soldiers working nearby, drawn by the initial commotion and the subsequent, unnerving silence, had begun to gather at a safe distance. Phones were out, discreetly recording. The audience for Thorne's humiliation was growing by the second. He was trapped in a public nightmare of his own making. He couldn't order her to stop without looking like a coward, afraid of what she might do next. Gunny Cole, now with a fierce, protective pride in his eyes, barked orders. "You heard the lady. Get a new target up at 500. Move." As the range crew scrambled, Evelyn began her preparations. She pulled a small Kestrel weather meter from a pouch, her movements unhurried. She checked the wind speed, the humidity, the barometric pressure. She was no longer just a shooter, she was a scientist applying her craft. She entered the data into a ballistic calculator on her wrist, her fingers flying across the tiny screen. The officers who had mocked her for being a numbers genius watched in horrified silence as she weaponized the very skills they had derided. The target was set. It looked like a tiny speck in the distance. Evelyn settled behind the rifle again. This time, there was no taunting, no jeering. There was only a breathless, reverent anticipation. She fired. A few seconds later, a faint ping echoed back from the distance. A direct hit. She fired again. And again. Each shot was a masterclass in the science of ballistics and the art of shooting. She was no longer just honoring her father. She was channeling him, taking his legacy and elevating it to a place of legend. Colonel Thorne stood by, a statue of impotent rage, forced to witness the woman he had tried to break publicly ascend to a level of greatness he could never hope to achieve. His attempt to put a girl in her place had resulted in his own public, spectacular castration. The lesson was indeed being taught, but it was he, and everyone who had laughed with him, who were the students. 6 months later, the tremors from that day were still reshaping Fort Jericho. Colonel Alastair Thorne was gone. The videos, recorded from a dozen different angles, had gone viral within the military's internal networks before leaking to the public. The story of the racist colonel and the sharpshooting PhD became a case study at the War College. An official investigation unearthed a career-long pattern of discriminatory behavior. Stripped of his command and demoted, Thorne was quietly reassigned to a remote logistics depot in Alaska, his career ending not with a bang, but with the humiliating whimper of shuffling paperwork under the supervision of officers who all knew his story. Captain Dr. Evelyn Reed, however, flourished. The Pentagon, recognizing a unique and invaluable asset, fast-tracked her. They created a new, experimental unit, the Cross-Domain Combat Analytics Program, designed to merge data science with battlefield marksmanship. They didn't just offer her a position, they asked her to build and lead it. At 31, she was a major, teaching elite operators how to think like scientists and scientists how to shoot like legends. Her story became an inspiration. Applications to technical fields from women and minority soldiers saw a significant spike. She received thousands of emails from people who had been told they didn't belong, telling her she had given them the courage to prove their doubters wrong. The range where it all happened was formally renamed. A polished bronze plaque now stood near the entrance, the Master Sergeant Marcus Reed Memorial Firing Range. It told the story of that day, ending with the line, "Let this place serve as a permanent reminder that true strength is not defined by prejudice, but proven by performance." Eve still visited her father's grave, but the visits were different now. The grief remained, a quiet ache, but it was now wrapped in a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. One crisp autumn afternoon, she stood before the simple headstone. "I did it, Dad," she whispered to the wind. "I showed them. Not just for me, and not just for you. But for everyone who comes after. I drove a truck right through their blind spot." She had learned the ultimate lesson her father had tried to teach her: the most powerful response to prejudice is not anger, but overwhelming, undeniable, soul-shattering excellence. She had taken their ridicule and forged it into fuel. She had taken their underestimation and turned it into the platform for her ascent. The girl they laughed at had become a legend who rewrote the rules. The world is full of people who will try to put you in a box based on what they see. But as Evelyn Reed proved, the only box that matters is the one you refuse to be put in. Her story is a powerful reminder that respect is earned, not given, and sometimes, the greatest justice comes from the barrel of a rifle held by the very person they swore could never shoot straight. What are your thoughts on Evelyn's journey? Share your own stories of overcoming prejudice in the comments below. Let's discuss, but please, always comment with respect for each other's experiences. And if this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because there are more legends waiting to be told.